Friends, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, good morning, welcome. We have Chazanit Yael Krieger here with us this morning, and later on in the service, the drash will be given by Gregory, who is the JCRC head of Northern California, and he's going to be giving the drash. So we're all here, and we will be eating Kiddush lunch outdoors, should the weather hold up as it's supposed to. We're setting it up right now. We're going to begin with a quick matovu on page 68, heading right after to the morning blessings for HaShachar and 73.
Matovu ohalecha Yaakov mishenotecha Yisrael. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov mishenotecha Yisrael.
Please rise, page 73.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natana sachli bina le'elchim ben yom uben layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani b'tzalma'o. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani bat chorim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam alpish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam atir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef tefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam roch haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa li kol tzorkim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamecheh mitzadei daber. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael b'gvurah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifarah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten layam
actually we go right now all the way to page Psalm 150 on page 134.
Hallelujah, 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 take a shofar, hallelujah, never the finor, hallelujah, tofu ma'or, hallelujah, meaning beruka, hallelujah, tziltzlei shama, hallelujah, tziltzlei trua, kol haneshama tehalelia, hallelujah, kol haneshama tehalelia, hallelujah.
Page 143.
Nishmat kol chai tvarech Hashem Adonai Eloheinu beruach kol.
Please rise for Baruch Hu.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach leolam va'ed.
Maybe seated. 153.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer uboreh choshech oseh shalom uboreh hakol. Ein kerkecha ve'ein zulatecha efes tiltecha u'midom elach. Ein kerkecha ve'ein zulatecha efes tiltecha u'midom elach. Ein kerkecha Adonai Eloheinu b'olam hazeh ve'ein zulatecha malkeinu chayei olam haba. Efes tiltecha golenu limot hamashiach ve'en dome lecha mosheinu l'tchiyat hametim el Adon al kol hamasim baruch u'mborach v'fi kol neshama
Godlo v'tshuva
malei olam da'at u'tbuna so v'mikmoto hamidgael Hayot HaKodesh v'netar v'chavod al-merkava zichut u'mishor lifnei chiso chesed v'rachamim lifnei levodo tovim me'orot shebara Eloheinu saram v'da'at v'bina u'haskel koach u'gvura natan bahem liot moshlim b'keret tevel v'neim ziv u'mfikim noga na'ezivam b'chol ha'olam snehim b'seitam v'sasim b'voam osim b'yehem ha'retzon konam le'erech havod nonim lishmot zala verina lezecher malchuto kara l'shamesh va'yizrach ora'a ve'hikin surat halana shebach not limo kol seva marom tiferet u'gedula srafim ve'ofanim ve'chayot HaKodesh ve'el asher shava mikol ha'masim. English, it's more shilling, I should add. Itarach surinu lakim. וכולם הולכים את פיהם בקדושת טהרה ושירה וזמרה מברכים ומשבחים ומפרים ומעריצים ומכחישים ומהמליכים את שם האל המלך הגדול הגיבור והנורא קדוש הוא וכולם מקבלים עליהם עול מלכות שמיים זה מזה ונותנים רשות זה לזה להקדיש לאברהם בנחת רוח בשפה ברורה ונעימה קדושה כולם כחרונים ואומרים ביראה קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבודו באופנים וחיות הקודש ורעש גדול מנסים ומזרחים ומתם משפים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו ואל ברוך ממות יתנו. אור חדש על ציון תאיר, אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו, מהרה לאורו. Baratanu Adonai Eloheinu Chem Gedola V'Tera Amalta Leinu Avinu Malkeinu Ba'avur Avotenu Shabatu Becha Avinu Malkeinu V'Atalam Demhu Kechayim Ketzefanenu Vanenu Avinu HaParachaman Amrachem Rachem Aleinu V'Tem V'Venu Lehavin L'Hasil Lishmoa V'Ilmodu Lelamed Lishmor V'Lasod U'Lekayem Et Kol Divrei Talmud Toratecha V'Yava V'Ha'erenu B'Toratecha V'Dahavenu B'Mitzvotecha V'Yachel Levavenu Le'ahava U'Yirah Shemecha V'Lo-Nevosh Le'olam Va'ed V'Lo-Nevosh Le'olam Va'ed Ki B'Shem Poshecha Adadol Hanocha V'Hataflu Nagila V'Nismecha Nagila V'Nismecha B'Yeshuatecha V'Ahavini L'Shalom Me'arba Kanfot Haaretz V'Tovolichenu Komemiyut Le'artzeinu Ki Elko Yeshuatata Uvanu B'Charta Mikolam V'Lashon V'Keraftanu L'Shimcha Hagadol Selah V'Yemet Le'hodot Lecha U'Le'achecha V'Yahava Baruch Atah Adonai Abocher B'Amo Yisrael B'Yahava Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha V'chol levacha v'chol nafshecha v'chol me'odecha V'hayu הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ולכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם מאוד על ידך והיית תותפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך.
We're at 167 through 169.
למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי ואיתם בראשי אלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמן. לדור ודור קיים ושמו קיים, וכיסו נכון מלכותו ואמונתו עולה קיים. חיים וקיימים. הראשונה. האמת שאתה אדוני אלוהינו גואל אבותינו, מלכנו מלך אבותינו, גואלנו גואל אבותינו, יוצרנו צור ישועתנו, כבודנו מצילנו מעולם שמך, אין אלוהים זולתך, עזרת אבותינו אתה ומעולם. Tehillah le'el elyon baruch hu borach Moshe u'nei Yisrael lechanu shira v'simcha rava ve'amru chulam Oni chamo
Private Amidah First, pages 175 through 192. can repeat the Amidah back on page 175.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor Hanola El Elyon Gomer Chasadim Tovim V'koneh Hakol V'zocher Chasdei Avod Maybe go out and claim an hand, the man Shamo B'Yahaba, Ne'lechozer Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham U'Poked Sarah, Atah Gibur L'Olam Adonai, Melchayim Eitim Atara V'Hoshia, Mashik HaRuach U'Morid HaGashem, Mechalkel Chayim V'Chesed, Mechayim Eitim V'Rachamim Rabim, Zolomech Nochlim V'Rofech Oholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar, Mikamoch Aval Geburot, Umidao Mehelav, Melech Meimid Umekayem, Yeshua, V'ne'eman natan ha'chayot mitim, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayei ha'metim.
Please rise for the Kiddush.
Ne'ekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, Keshem shemati hishim, Oto b'shmei marom, Ka'hakatuv aya neviyecha, V'karazeh ve'amar.
Kadosh, Kadosh, Adonai Tzvaot, ha'aretz ke'olo.
Adonai Tzevaot, Melo kol haaretz kevodo. Az v'kol rash gadol adir v'chazak mahashmim kol mitnasim lehu matrafim leumatam baruch yomeru. Yai dai dai dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai 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 dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai dai dai. Baruch kavod Adonai במקומך מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו כמחכים אנחנו לך, מתי תמלוך בציון, וקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור לדור ודור נצח נצחים. ועינינו תראנה מלכותך שפחה אלוהינו בפינו ליבוש לעולם ועד, כי המלך קדוש וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
We may be seated. We're on page 181. 181.
ישמח משה בנעמת נחל כי אבן נאמן כחתנו ולהיות תפארת בראשו נתת בעומדו לפניך על הר סיני ושני ליקות אבנים הוריד בידו וכתוב בהם שמירת שבת וכן כתוב בתורתך וכן כתוב בתורתך ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם וגם מנוחתו לא ישכנו ארעילים כפי ישראל וחנתתו באהבה לזרע יעקב אשר בם בחרת המקששתי כולם יזכו וינתקו מטובך ואשתי רצית בו וקידשתו חמדת ימים אותו קראת זכר למעשה בראשית אלוהינו אלוהי אבותינו רצה מנוחתנו קדשנו במצוותיך ותן חלקנו בתורתך שדנו בטובך ושמחנו בישועתך וטהר ליבנו לעבדך באמת והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה וברצון שבת קודשך וינוחו ישראל מקדשי שמך ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת רצה אדוני אלוהינו בעמך ישראל תפילתם והשב את עבודה לדביר ביתך ואישי ישראל תפילתם ואהבת תקבל ברצון ותפילתם תמיד עבודת ישראל לעמך ותחזינה עינינו בשוחה לציון ברחמים ברוך אתה אדוני המחזיר שכינתו לציון מודים אנחנו לך. כתוב כאילו כל רחמך ורחם כאילו תמוך חסדך מעולם קיווינו לך ויעל כולם יקראו כתרומת שמך מלכינו תמילו לך בעת וכל החיים ידעו חסלה ויעלו את שמך בימיהם כלל ישועתנו ועזרתנו סלע ברוך אתה אדוני הטוב שמך ולחנה להודות אלוהינו אבותינו ברכנו בברכה משולשת בתורה הכתובה על ידי משה עבדך אמורה מפי אהרון ובניו כהנים עם קדושך כחמור יברכך אדוני וישמרך יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך יישא אדוני פניו אליך ויעצם לך שלום ציון שלום טובה וברכה חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ברכנו אבינו כולנו כאחד מאור פניך כי באור פניך נתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לעמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה יהי שלומך ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום.
Kiddush Shalem.
יתקדש ויקדש שמי רבה לעמד ולחורתי ולהתמחותי וחייכנו ולחנו חיית כל בית ישראל והגלה בזמן קריב וימרו יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמיה יתברך ישתבח יברך פרמה מנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי לקודשה לעילם ינקו ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירה מיומה וימרו תקבל זרועתנו והזלון זכו ישראל קדם ובהוני ושמיה וימרו יהי שלמה רבה משמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל וימרו עושה שלום בברמה ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל וימרו Amen.
We are now at the Torah service, page 195, and we invite our ark openers and our Torah carrier to come on up. We're reading the Torah from the Bima today.
Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai v'yein k'ma'asecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor Adonai melech Adonai melech Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed Adonai hoz le'amo yitein Adonai yevarech et amo b'shalom Av harachamim eitiv v'ritzon ha'et Zion Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim Ki becha levad batachnu Melech el ram v'nisa Adon olamim Vayehi b'nsoa Aaron vayomer Moshe Uma Adonai ve'afutzu oilecha ve'yanusu misanecha mipanecha Ki mitzion tetzei Torah Ki mitzion tetzei Torah u'nevar Adonai mi'Yerushalayim Baruch shenatan Torah Baruch shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael v'kedushato Ve'yan harachetz ve'rishmei kadisha kadisha yakira ana emar tushbechan yehei rabak ha'adama v'tikach libi v'yoraita v'tashli mishalin delihi v'lihi b'lechol amach Yisrael
one of us should probably be helping that aspect, but he's got it on his own. We'll close the ark. Yeah, right there.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adoneinu, Kadosh Shemo.
Adu Adonai. Ishtachavu Hadam
May be seated. All right, our parsha today is Vayera. It's Genesis chapter 21. What page is that in Chaim? Anybody? Do you have that?
Yeah, it's 112.
It's 112. So 21:1. This Vayera is the busiest Torah portion in the entire Torah. Just a lot of action. And we get some of the most exciting action, including the entirety, really, of what we read on Rosh Hashanah, both day 1 and day 2. Because in day 1, we read about God visiting Sarah, whatever that means. Various translations of that. Hashem Hakad et Sarah. Visited, took note, remembered. Anyway, came back to giving her, or granting her, the child that she had longed for, that she and Abraham had longed for. And then, of course, it doesn't go so well, because there's still that same tension with Hagar, with Ishmael. I'll get to that as we get to each parsha. And then we end today with the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, and the lineage that follows that. So, chapter 21, 1 through 4 is the first Aliyah. God visits Sarah with the child, and that child, Isaac, is circumcised at 8 days. So, 21:1, once again, page 112.
Look it up. You gotta look it up.
Probably up in there, like up there.
Baruch et Adonai HaMorach. Baruch Adonai Morach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim. Now, Chanwa Niwan Torato, Baruch Atah Adonai, Notina Torah.
Amen. Adonai, Bakaret Sarah, Kasher Amar, Vayas Adonai, Lesarah, Kasher Diber, Adar, Bakeret Sarah, Leabraham, Ben Iskuna, Lamoed, Asher Diber, Oto Elohim, Vayikra Abraham, Et Shem Beno, Hanolad Lo, Asher Yalda Lo, Sarah, Yitzchak, ויאמר אברהם את יצחק בנו בן 8 ימים כאשר ציווה אותו אלוהים.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם אתה בתוכנו Baruch atah Adonai, noten Torah.
Amen. Yashar Second Aliyah, chapter 21, verses 5 through 13. Isaac is named Yitzchak after. They see Ishmael playing with him, and Sarah wants him cast out. Playing seems to have sexual connotations if you take that word the way it has been used in other contexts of the Torah. Abraham is very distressed, but like before, kind of stays out of it. And God promises that a great nation will come from both his sons, from both Isaac and Ishmael. Verses 5 through 13.
Yamad, Gabriel ben Shlomo Halevi.
Baruch Hu Adonai HaMavarach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher barucha bonu mikol mo'amin v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah.
Amen.
Amen. לאברהם בן 100 שנה ויברך לו את יצחק בנו. ותאמר שרה צחוק עשה לי אלוהים כל השומע יצחק לי. ותאמר מי בגלל אברהם הנקה בנים שרה כי ילדתי להם לזקונה. ויגדל הילד ויגמל ויעש אברהם משתה גדול ביום יגמל את יצחק. ותרא שרה את בן הגר המצרית אשר ילדה לאברהם מצחק. ותאמר לאברהם קרש האמה הזאת את בנה כי לא ינש בן האמה הזאת עם בני עם יצחק. וירא הדבר מאוד בעיני אברהם על אודות בנו. ויאמר אלוהים אל אברהם אל ירא בעיניך על ענת ועל ענתך אשר תאמר אליך שרה שמע בקולה כי ליצחק יקרא לך זרע.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah.
All right. Hagar, verses 14 through 21, in chapter 21, Hagar thinks that Ishmael's about to die and she can't look. I mean, it's so painful watching her child die or die of thirst or starve to death, whatever it is. Of course, it's debatable whether Ishmael's even a child at this point, but that's a separate question. In any case, angels call to her, they make her look, and God makes a well miraculously appear, so they will be taken care of. Chapter 21, verses 14 through 21.
Yandu, Aviva ben Shlomo Barachel, Moshe ben Mordechai Basara Shlishi.
אמן. וגם את פן עמלקו ישימנו כי זרעך הוא. וישכם אברהם בבוקר, ויקח לחם וחימת מים, וייתן אל הגר, שם על שכמה, ואת הילד וישחיה. ותלך ותיתה במדבר ברשבה. ויפלו המים מן החמת, ותשלך את הילד תחת אחד השיחים. ותלך ותשב לה מנגד, הרחק כמטחווי קשת, כי היא אמרה על ערב אמות הילד. ותשב מנגד ותישא את קולה ותהי. וישמע אלוהים את קול הנער, ויקרא מלאך אלוהים אל הגר מן השמיים, ויאמר לה מלאך הגר, אל תיראי, כי שמע אלוהים אל קול הנער באשר הוא שם. קומי שאי את הנער, והחזיקי את ידך בו, כי לגוי גדול עשימנו. ויפקח אלוהים את עיניה, ותראה באר מים, ותלך, ותמלא את החמת מים, ותשק את הנער. ויהי אלוהים את הנער ויקטל, וישב במדבר, ויהי רובה קשה. וישב במדבר פרן, ותיקח לו עמו אישה בארץ מצרים.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהים מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורה אמת, וחיי עולם נתן לנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. The covenant between Abraham and Avimelech, chapter 21, verses 22 through 34. That's the fourth aliyah.
Shama, Deborah, Baruch, Asher, Lehi.
ויאמר אבימלך ובכל שר צבאות אל אברהם לאמור, אלוהים עמך בכל אשר אתה עושה, ואתה תשב עלי אלוהים הנה, אם תזכור לי ולני ולנכדי כחסד אשר עשיתי עמך תעשה עמדי ועם הארץ אשר גרת בה. ויאמר אברהם אנוכי שבע, והוכיח אברהם את אבימלך על אודות באר המים אשר גזלו עבדי אבימלך. ויאמר אבימלך לא ידעתי מי עשה את הדבר הזה, וגם אתה לא הכרת לי, וגם אנוכי לא שמעתי בלתי היום. ויקח אברהם צאן ובקר ויתן לאבימלך, ויפתו שניהם ברית. ויצב אברהם את 7 כבשות הצאן לבתיהם. ויאמר אבימלך אל אברהם, מה הנה 7 כבשות האלה אשר הצבת לבתנה? ויאמר כי את 7 כבשות תיקח מידי, ועבור תהיה לי לידה, כי חפרתי את הפר הזאת. על כן קרא למקום ההוא באר שבע, כי שם נשבעו שניהם. ויכרתו ברית בבאר שבע, ויקום אבימלך בכל שק צבאו, וישובו אל ארץ פלישתים. ויטע אשל בבאר שבע, ויקרא שם בשם אדוני אלוהים. ויגור אברהם בארץ פלישתים ימים רבים.
All right, chapter 22, verses 1 through 8, the very famous binding of Isaac, Akedah, for the 5th Aliyah. And you'll notice Isaac is not, Isaac's not a kid when he does this, but the tension is still incredible. But what's going to happen is they're still in it together. Abraham and Isaac, they're perhaps in cahoots. The two of them walk on together. Perhaps Isaac knows exactly what is happening. But in either case, they keep saying the word, Hineni, here I am, I'm here for you. They're together, they're as one. I'm here for you in your time of need, Abraham says to Isaac. That connects to our guest speaker, Gregory, who we'll introduce more later, from the JCRC in the event we're having on Monday, which is called Hineni, I am here, and has to do with people being here for the Jewish people and us being here for each other in a time of anti-Semitism. You're going to see this Hineni connecting right here. Chapter 22, verses 1 through 8.
Yamdu Sarah Malka Ba'ariba Daniel ben Moshe Hamishi
אמן. ויהי אחר הדברים האלה, והאלוהים נישא את אברהם, ויאמר אליו אברהם, ויאמר הנני. ויאמר קח נא את בנך את יחידך אשר אהבת את יצחק, ולך לך אל ארץ המוריה, והעלהו שם לעולה על אחד הערים אשר אומר אליך. וישכם אברהם בבוקר, ויחבוש את חמורו, ויקח את 2 נעריו עמו, איתו ואת יצחק בנו, ויקץ עולה, ויקום וילך אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים. ביום השלישי וישא אברהם את עיניו, וירא את המקום מרחוק. ויאמר אברהם אל נעריו, שבו לכם פה עם החמור, ואני והנער נלך עד כה, ונשתחווה ונשובה עליכם. ויקח אברהם אל עצי העולה, וישם על יצחק בנו, ויקח בידו את האש ואת המאכלת, וילכו שניהם יחדיו. ויאמר יצחק אל אברהם אביו, ויאמר אבי, ויאמר הנני בני, ויאמר הנה האש והעצים, ויעשה לעולם. ויאמר אברהם אלוהים יראה לו עשה לעולם בני, וילכו שניהם יחדיו.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tokeinu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu haTorah.
Amen. Yashkar. Yakedah continues verses 9 through 19. Yashkar, especially to Hokigor, for reading so much Torah. Kurt Shacker will read the next parts, and Kurt was a regular reader on the second day of Rosh Hashanah for high holidays. So this is great. He knows this portion, except he knows it according to an entirely different trope. So he may be slipping back and forth for all we know. We'll have to see. But if you hear that, that is why. Verses 9 through 19.
Yandir, Miriam and Avram and Sarah, Reuben ben Bel, Shishi.
Asher b'charbanu mikol ha'amim, v'natan ha'eret Torah, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu haTorah. Amen. Amen. Vayavo el hamakom asher amar ha'elohim, vayven sham Avraham et hamizbeach, vayavov et ha'etzim, ויעקוד את יצחק בנו, וישם אותו למזבח ממעל העצים. וישלח אברהם את ידו, ויקח את המאכלת לשחוט את בנו. ויקרא אליו מלאך אדוני מן השמיים, ויאמר אברהם, ויאמר הנני. ויאמר אל תשלח ידך אל הנער ואל תעש לו מאומה, כי אתה ידעתי, כי הרי אלוהים אתה ולא חשפת את פנחת יחידך ממני. וישא אברהם את עיניו, ויבין העיר לך נחת בסבך בפניו. וילך אברהם ויקח את העיר, ויעלה לעולה תחת עינו. ויקרא אברהם שבמקום ההוא אדוני יראה, אשר יאמר היום להר אדוני יראה. ויקרא מלאך אדוני אברהם שני מן השמיים, ויאמר בי נשבעתי עיני, יען אשר עשית את הדבר הזה, ולא חשפת את פנחת יחידך. כי ברך אברכך, והרבה את צרך כחופי השמיים, וכחול אשר אספת הים, וירש צרך את שער אויביו. ויתברכו בברכה כל גויי הארץ, עקב אשר שמעת בקולי. וישוב אברהם אל נעריו, וילכו יחדיו אל באר שבע, וישב אברהם בשבע. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נתן אלוהינו. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו התורה.
Amen. Yashakua. And chapter 22, verses 20 through 24, passage concludes with the lineage, Abraham's further lines, as we call upon Lisa to read these last portions of Torah. Did I not pick a seven? Oh no, I did. Here, Sarah Korn, come on up. I knew I picked somebody. Not just somebody. Former Baptist student Sarah Korn.
Shabbat Yisrael B'Shendel Shemi'i.
Yeah, sorry, Sarah. Please rise for the Chatzi Kaddish. We may be seated as those last few verses are repeated, and we call once again upon Oti Gold, who will be chanting the Haftarah. Shabbat, Abraham, Sarah, come up here.
אשר בחרתנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. אמן. ויהי אחרי הדברים האלה יהודה לאברהם לאמור, הנה ילדה ילכת גם היא בנים ונחור אחיך את עוצבך הרוג את עוז אחיו ואת שמואל אבי ארם ואת חצק עזוב ואת ילדש ואת גדלף ואת בתואל ובתואל ילד את רבקה 8,000 ילדה מלכה ונחור את אברהם אחי אברהם ופילשו ושמה ואומה ותלת גם היא את טבח ואת גאה ואת האחש ואת רחה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
For all who read, we should wrap up Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov, Sakim Karakal Leon, who is our refuge, our Rebbetzar Levayom, Likom, Likvodot, HaTorah, Likvodot Shabbat, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yivrechotam, Mishpachotam, Vaishlam, Mavat, Tzchak, Masei, Kol Shrechem, Pinofar. Amen. Thinking especially today of those who are ill in our community, including Roger Gilbert, David Gutman, Alana Nachman, Yehudi Bat Miriam Aaron, Jackie Cohen, Yoni Yosef Ben Shmuel, Jeff Wade, Leah Bat Freila Bazalman, Carmel Boria Bat Ariel Sarah, Marina Gottschalk, David Snyder, Dale Mendelson, Miriam Bat Yehudi, Shlamit Bat Leah, Mark Rosenthal, Eva Abrams Leimowitz, Yechiel Ben Eliza, Justin Hardy, Leah Bat Shimon Lazar, Lindsay Gurman, Albert Alter, Missy Rosen, Ray Ramshaw, Daniel Ben Sarah, Shabtai Dov Ben Shimon Moshe, Leah Yehudi Bat Shena, Rina Bola Bat Hadav Yehuda Tzvi, William Oak, Lou Burrow, Barbara Rose, Dahlia Bat Razel, and Scott Lawrence. Do you have any other names of those who are ill? Go ahead and say them out loud this morning. Avotenu, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Yivarech, Virapeh, et Ahonim, Elna Refana, Elna Refana, Elna Refana, Elna Refana, Mishevera, Avotenu, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Yivarech, Virapeh, et Ahonim. May God bless and heal all those who are ill. May we continue to be with them in their time of need. We rise now for Abba and Galil.
Tamar, Amariva, Tamar, Agolelet.
Vezot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael b'yad Adonai b'yad Moshe Eitz Chaim ni l'machazikim v'tomchei ha'mehushar Eitz Chaim ni l'machazikim v'tomchei divrei Shalom, Yerapea Garmei Noam, Bechol divrei Shalom, page 124. It is Second Kings chapter 4. Miracles of Elisha. Elisha is not the same guy as Elijah. Elijah is Eliyahu in Hebrew. Elisha is Elisha, a disciple of Eliyahu. And basically, they're miracles, and the idea is they're rewards for hospitality, which is part of the parsha, and sometimes that reward is fertility, a son. So that's what happens in this story of a Haftarah. 2 Kings chapter 4. Once again, it's on page 124.
May I tell a little story about the Haftarah?
Yeah, please.
I was teaching this to Benjamin Ring, and when we got to the Sephardic break, Benjamin said, "Why do we stop here? I mean, the guy just died and we don't know what's going to happen to him." And I said, "Well, Rabbi wants to keep it short for a bar mitzvah, but maybe we'll just learn the whole thing and maybe it'll work out." And then I was sitting at lunch and telling some people about that, and we're giggling and chuckling about that. And I said, "We just won't tell the rabbi." And unbeknownst to me, the rabbi was sitting right behind me. And he swiggled and said, "What aren't you telling the rabbi?" And I said, "Benjamin just really wants to know what happened to the boy, whether he stayed dead or whatever happened. So he would like to read the whole thing. Can he, please?" And I don't remember how you answered, but Benjamin did sing the whole thing. But I will stop where you tell me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar b'milim tovim, v'ratza b'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'torah, u'Moshe avdo, u'Yisrael amo, u'b'nbiei ha'emet. Ve'ishachad min shei b'nei Anvim, tzaka Elisha lemor, avdecha ishim met, ve'ata yadata, ki avdecha haya yarei Adonai, ve'hanoshe לקחת את שני ילדיי לא לעבדים. ויאמר אליה אלישע, מה אעשה לך? הגידי לי מה יש לך בבית. ותאמר אין לשפחתך חול בבית, כי חשוך שמן. ויאמר לכי שאלי לך כלים מן החוץ מאת כל שכנייך, כלים ריקים אל תמיתי. ובאת וסגרת הדלת בעדך ובעד בנייך, ויצק על כל הכלים האלה, והמלא תעשי. ותלך מאיתו, ותסגור הדלת בעדה ובעד בניה, הם מקישים אליה והיא מוצקת. ויהי כמות הכלים, ותאמר אל בנה, הגישה אלי עוד כלים ויאמר אליה אין עוד אלי ויעמוד השמן ותבוא ותקד איש האלוהים ויאמר לכי מכרי את השמן ושלמי את משייך ואת ובנייך תקחי בנותיו ויהי היום ויעבור אלישע אל שונם ושם אישה גדולה ותחזק בו לאכול לחם ויהי מידי עוברו יסור שמה לאכול לחם ותאמר אלישע הננה ידעתי כי איש אלוהים קדוש הוא אומר עלינו תמיד נעשה נער ידקר קטנה ונשים לו שם מיטה ושולחן בכיסא ונורא והיה בבואו אלינו יסור שמה ויהי היום ויבוא שמה ויסר אל העלייה וישכב שמה ויאמר אל גחזי נערו קרא לשונמית הזאת ויקרא לה ותעמוד לפניו ויאמר לו אמור נא אליה הנה חרת אלינו את כל החרדה הזאת מלעשות לך היש לדבר לך אל המלך או אל שר הצבא ותאמר בתוך עמי אנוכי יושבת ויאמר לעשות לך ויאמר גחזי אבל בן אלה ואישה זקן ויאמר קרא לה ויקרא לה ותעמוד בפתח ויאמר למועד הזה כעת חיה את חובקת בן ותאמר על אדוני איש האלוהים אל תחזר בשפחתך ותהר האישה ותלד בן למועד הזה כעת חיה אשר דיבר אליה אלישע ויגדל הילד ויהי היום ויצא אל אביו אל הקוצרים ויאמר אל אביו ראשי ראשי ויאמר אל הנער צערו אל אמו ויסערו ויביאו אל אמו וישב על ברכיה עד צהריים וימות ותשכיבהו על מיטה איש האלוהים ותזכור בעדו ותצא ותקרא אלישע ותאמר שולחנה לי אחד מן הנערים ואחת האתונות וירוצה עד איש האלוהים וישובה ויאמר מדוע את הולכת אליו היום לא חודש ולא שבת ותאמר שלום ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם צור כל העולמים צדיק בכל הדורות האל הנאמן האומר ועושה המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו, ונאמנים דבריך, ודבר אחד מדבריך, אחור לא ישוב ריקם. כי אל מלך נאמן ורחמן רבה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הנאמן בכל דבריו. רחם על ציון תהי בית חיינו, ולעלוות נפש תושיע במהרה בימינו. ברוך אתה אדוני, משמח ציון בבניה. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו, אליהו הנביא עבדך, ובמלכות בית דוד לשבטך. במהרה יבוא ויגל ליבנו, על כסאו לא ישב זר, ולא ינחלו אחרים את כבודו. כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו, שלא יכפה נרו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן דוד. על הדורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה, שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת.
Amen. Yasher Koach.
Thank you so much, OT. We're going to now turn back in our Siddur. Prayer for the state of Israel. Be on page 224. And it's, of course, quite possible that Adi Shacker is watching from Israel, as Kurt read Torah today. So, hello to Kibbutz Magal, as we read this prayer in honor of you, in both Hebrew and English. Avinu Shabashamayim, Zor Yisrael, Rolo, Orech et Hinat Yisrael, Reshit Smichat Gulatenu, Hagen Alea, Ve'evrat Chastecha, Ufros Alea, Sukat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha, Ve'amitcha L'Rashea Tzarea, Ve'yotzeha, Ve'taknem Ve'etza Tova, Milfanecha, Chazek et Yidei Mignei Eretz Kodshenu, V'hanchilem Eloheinu Yeshua, Ve'ater Nitzachon Teatreb, Ve'natata Shalom Ba'aretz, V'simchat Olam Yashvea, Ve'nomar, Amen. Our Av that is in heaven, Rock of Israel and its Redeemer, bless the state of Israel, the first flowering of our redemption. Shield her with the wings of your loving kindness. Spread over her the shelter of your peace. Send your light and your truth to her heads of state, her ministers and her advisors. Restore them with good counsel before you. Strengthen the hands of those who defend your holy land. Bequeath to them our God's salvation. Adorn them with a crown of triumph, and grant peace in the land and eternal joy to its inhabitants. And let us say, Amen. We turn to the Ashrei on page 231. Being that there's only one 7th grader here, I'm not going to make him do it by himself. Unless he wants to, he can come running up here, but I didn't think so, obviously. So that means, Hazaniel, you're back on for Ashrei page 231.
Ashrei Shevetach, Od Yahaleluka Salam. Tila LeDavid, Aramim Kalahai Hamelah, Barakah Shechalalam Ba'ed. Gadol Adonai Himel Me'od, Jali Gulato and Haker. Hadar Kavakodecha, V'divrei Nikotecha Asicha. Zecharav Tuchayavu, V'sivkacha Yiranenu. Tov Adonai Lakol, Barachamav al Kol Masav. Kevod Malchutcha Yomeru, U'gvuratcha Yidaberu. מלכות כל עמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. עיניך לך יסברו, ואתה נותן להם את אוכלם בטוב. צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו, וחסיד בכל מעשיו. רצון יראיו יעשה, ואת שבתם ישמע ויושיעם. תהילת אדוני ידבר פי, ויברך כל בשר שם קדשו לעולם ועד. ואנחנו נברכיה מעתה ועד עולם. Hallelujah.
We rise for the return of the sacred Torah to the ark. Of course, there's a lot to do before it goes in there, and no hakafah still, but nevertheless. It's on page 234.
Yeah, hallelujah, Shem Adonai, Ki nizkar Shemo levado, Odo haaretz v'shamayim, v'yaren keren leyavo, tila lecho v'asidav, l'himei Yisrael amkerovo. Hallelujah.
seated. So I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, our guest darshan today, which is Gregory. Ty born and grew up in the San Diego area, attended UC Davis as an undergraduate. He's done work with APAC, where he served as a political director for our Northern California or West Coast region. He then ran the organization called A Wider Bridge. And Wider Bridge is an organization which both introduces and advocates for Israel among the LGBTQ population, but also advocates for that population within Israel. So it has sort of a dual duty. I don't know if that's an accurate description, but did a great job with that. And now he directs the Northern California JCRC, Jewish Community Relations Council. And he also, well, first of all, I guess if you were working for Wider Bridge, I ran into him on the streets of Jerusalem and got a great free dinner out of it at the Toro restaurant, which overlooks the old city of Jerusalem. Still very much appreciate that. It's fantastic. You were there too, right? Yeah, we all did. And I don't know if this is the most important thing, but it's definitely important. He's a very dear friend of the Rapsit family. Like, spends a lot of time with all the Rapsits. So, and thanks for bringing him today. And it's great to have you with us, Ty. So, with that, here's Ty.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thanks so much for having me, Rabbi. Glad you enjoyed that dinner. We had a lesbian Ethiopian Israeli speaker that night. It was pretty fascinating. So very diverse community. So I also want to give a big shout out to my friend Ann Rapson and my friend Jessica Sterling, who also helped make this talk happen. So thank you both. Let's talk about something light today. America's culture war. Does that sound like a light topic? I'm not going to take a side on it. We're not going to take a position. But I do want to reflect on it for a minute because it seems like it's come back, right? The 90s and the early 2000s were all about the culture war in America. It's back. And the epicenter of the culture war today seems to be our classrooms, in particular our high school classrooms. We, of course, are debating in this country about mask mandates. About a year ago, we were debating about in-person or remote learning and what effect that would have on our kids. There's also been a more recent debate on this construct of critical race theory and what role it should or should not have in our classroom. And the conversation looks very different depending on what state you live in or even what part of our state. And zooming in locally, some of you have been following the San Francisco Unified School District because 3 of their board members are now facing recalls after they, among other things, decided to change the names of some of San Francisco's high schools from Abraham Lincoln High and Diane Feinstein Elementary School, arguing that they were inappropriate, right? So this whole concept of the culture war seems to have moved to public education. And I hate to say it, but our community was both a canary in a coal mine for this culture war, and we find ourselves between a rock and a hard place. It's never a good thing for our community when we are getting squeezed by a culture war. But that's where we find ourselves. And so I want to talk specifically about another topic in this so-called educational culture war, and that is ethnic studies. Just want to do a quick poll of the audience. Hi, everybody watching on Zoom. Raise your hand. I'm going to ask 3 options, okay? You've read extensively about this ethnic studies issue. You've heard about it here and there, or this is brand new, Ty. I have no idea what you're talking about. So just show of hands, those that are pretty familiar with this topic. Okay, great. Those that have sort of read a thing or two or seen about a headline, great. And those for whom this is a new topic. Wow. Okay, I guess we've done a pretty good job with PR then. So, about 2.5 years ago, my colleagues in our ICS department, our Institute for Curriculum Services, they review textbooks and curriculum to make sure that Jews, Judaism, and Israel are presented fairly in the classroom. They discovered these anti-Semitic rap lyrics in the ethnic studies model curriculum for our state. And it was a huge wake-up call that something was off. And this concept of ethnic studies was really not in our community's vocabulary yet. And so, A, What's going on here? How is the BDS movement getting these anti-Semitic, anti-Israel rap lyrics into this curriculum? B, why isn't our state better knowledge and equipped to deal with that? How did it end up? How did it pass the smell test? And C, how should our community think about ethnic studies, given that this was sort of our first experience with the issue? And I have to say that we've gone far beyond our expectations of where this would end up, but we have a long way to go. So I'll talk about that in a moment, but I do want to say that as this moves into the district level, we've been doing a lot of work at the state level, so goes California on this issue, so goes the nation. We're one step ahead. Some of you saw that the governor signed ethnic studies into law. It's going to be a graduation requirement for every public high school, starting with a class of 2930, which means if they're freshmen in 2025, they'll enter high school. So there's about a 4-year window now where every high school in California is going to have to figure out how to adopt their own version of ethnic studies for kids. There are now several states who are following suit. Minnesota, Massachusetts, New York, the DC metro area. It's like dominoes. We knew this was going to happen and we're seeing it before our eyes. So the bottom line is we have to get this right in California, not only for our community, not only for our kids, but also for the country, because they are looking at what's happening here and they're seeing it as a litmus test and a best practice of what to implement in their states. And that's where my organization comes in, the Jewish Community Relations Council. And we really are taking this issue seriously because we know the entire country is now watching this issue, which two and a half years ago, no education culture war, no concept really of ethnic studies in our community, except for the Jewish studies, perhaps academic departments, who know their ethnic studies colleagues in schools like San Francisco State, where actually, arguably, ethnic studies was founded 50 years ago. So it's our responsibility as the JCRC to solve problems that no individual agency or synagogue or Jewish group could solve alone. We're the collective action organization for the Jewish community here in the Bay Area. And this ethnic studies issue, which is one of many issues that we're tackling, including these renames in the high schools, by the way, but this is sort of the entree issue of the day, and we're taking it very seriously because of where we sit in this national conversation. But before I talk about how we should prescribe a solution to this issue, we have to ask ourselves, what is ethnic studies? Well, if you had two people up here who were debating the issue, they would cite different parts of this week's Torah portion. If you were really against this week's ethnic studies portion, or this ethnic studies curriculum, you'd probably cite Sodom. And you'd say that, these people of Sodom have gone through this ethnic studies thing, it's been terrible for their society, and Lot's wife, who turned around and turned into a pillar of salt, she just took the course, right? That would be their argument for how to interpret it with this week's portion. And then the opposite, the founders of ethnic studies, who have been fighting for this for 50 years, they've been on college campuses for a while, African American studies, Latino studies, or Chicano studies, etc. They would say that this is sort of like Abraham and Sarah, year 100 and year 90, who never thought that this would happen. Finally, we never thought it would happen. It is finally entering our public high schools. We are tired and we have been fighting for so long, and here it finally is. Isaac is their ethnic studies, right? So depending on what side of this debate is, you could have a very different conversation about this week's Torah portion. I'll talk at the end about what I think is the appropriate part of it, which the rabbi alluded to earlier. But the reality is, if we want to talk about ethnic studies in very straightforward terms, this is about communities of color having representation in the classroom that was denied from them, okay? If you think about our history books, if you think about our social studies books, in the history of our country, who wrote them? What narrative were they writing about? From whose vantage point? Right. So let me tell you, it's probably not representative of what these communities would have liked to have, for generations and generations, right? So it seems pretty reasonable when you just break it down to brass tacks that communities of color should have a voice and a say of what our kids are learning in the classroom. And because they've been denied this opportunity, it seems like a pretty good idea, right? Now, the devil's in the details, and we'll talk about some of that in a little bit, but that's really where I stand from it, and I think maybe it helps to illuminate it with a personal example, okay? So I'll give an example. I was a kid in the 90s, and in 4th grade, we had you do California history, right? And so living in San Diego, of course, they took us to the missions, that's right, and we did this amazing paper mache product, being the gay kid in school, I loved the art projects, And so, you took this cereal box, like the Honey Nut Cheerio cereal box, you put paper mache on it, you put the little cross on top, and then you build your mission and you turn it in. It's like, great, let's celebrate mission culture. What's the problem? Did the indigenous peoples communities have any say over that curriculum? Did we think about that at all when we were doing that art project? No. Okay, so it seems pretty reasonable. One of the 4 core communities that make up the ethnic studies movement, indigenous peoples, they might have something else to say about that, right? But we had no consciousness that that was, a problematic way to think about California history at the time, right? So ethnic studies for that community is really about telling a different side of the story, okay? So that's like a personal example from the 90s. It's kind of like when you watch a movie from 15, 20 years ago, a comedy, and there's like these moments where you cringe because the jokes aren't funny anymore. It's kind of like that, right? So it makes sense that we want to be able to support these communities of color that have been denied these opportunities. Now let's be clear. In the same way that the Black Lives Matter movement and the murder of George Floyd are different than a handful of anti-Semitic actors that have an agenda around Israel, the ethnic studies movement is not the same thing as the BDS movement. The ethnic studies movement is not about Israel or the Jewish community. It's about communities of color and their representation and voice in the classroom, okay? There are actors, especially in some of these very progressive university departments, that would like to see BDS both in their academic courses and in this high school course, which is why we ended up with this problem. But this really wasn't about our community in the first place. So where does that leave us? How should we think about it? Well, guess what? It turns out that our community has been missing an opportunity as well in terms of education. We talk about the Holocaust, which is super important in our schools, but we don't talk about our community as a multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-denominational global people with all the nuance and complexity that we would want students, not just Jewish students, but every student in public schools to learn about. If we want them to understand why we need a Jewish state, they better understand our complicated and nuanced history and the complexity of Jewish identity. Ethnic studies offers that discussion for other communities, and that's a really valuable tool for our community to also have in this story, right? And so when we saw these problems, we said, we're going to support ethnic studies, and we think we have a role to play, because our community can gain something really important too. But it goes beyond that. A big portion of this conversation is about white supremacy in this country. And there were those that opposed us having the Jewish lesson plans in this course, but that doesn't make any sense. How can you talk about white supremacy and racism in this country and not talk about anti-Semitism? How can you look at Charlottesville, or 6 million was not enough after the January 6th riot, and say that Jews don't belong in a semester-long course where one of the constructs that we're trying to address is white supremacy or white nationalism in this country, right? Pretty much our sweet spot to be in the conversation, okay? So we've been taking an approach to lift up these communities of color and include the Jewish community. And so let's talk about the advocacy work now. Keeping that in mind, since day one, we've had 4 objectives with ethnic studies. Take out the bad stuff, include a robust definition of anti-Semitism, include a Jewish American lesson plan, and have guardrails, meaning we have to make sure that there are protections so that these courses can't be taught in the wrong way. And so as we pursued the work with the California State Legislature in developing this curriculum, those have always been the barometers of success for us. And I'm proud to say that the model curriculum met all 4 of those objectives, and this ethnic studies mandate, which is going into effect, has extensive guardrails to make sure that districts and teachers can't violate anti-discrimination rules. And one thing in particular we were successful in getting into this bill was discrimination based on nationality, because we understood that there was going to be efforts, and there will be efforts on the local level to insert BDS and anti-Israel rhetoric in there. The law of the land says, can't do that. But we can't stop at the state level. In fact, we have to have a 4-tiered strategy as a community to really see this problem through. If you're a school district superintendent, you don't want the state to tell you what to do. You say, I know my students, I know my teachers, I know my schools better than those folks in Sacramento. I don't really want to follow what they have to say, okay? And then you go to the school principal, and the school principal says, I know my teachers and students better than the school district superintendent and the school board members. I'm going to roll my eyes and figure out how to do it myself. And then the individual teacher looks at the school principal and says, I know my kids. I can do this better. So the point being, we have to think about this work at all 4 levels in public education. We have to continue our relationships with the California Department of Education, our state legislators, and the governor's office. We have to build relationships with school board members, including here in Alameda County, and the superintendent. We have to work with teachers and principals, and that's really where parents come in, right? We have to make sure that we are represented in PTAs and that constituents and voters for these schools are really in the conversation with us. And then there's the individual teacher. We got to make sure that those teachers that are learning how to teach ethnic studies, right? There will be teachers that come forward and start teaching this course. We have to make sure that they're being taught correctly how to implement this course for most school districts in California for the first time. So we can't stop with the work in Sacramento. We can't stop with the Alameda County work. We have to go down to the teacher level, and we can't skip any of those efforts. So that's our strategy at JCRC, and it's critical that we partner with agencies and synagogues like Beth Abraham, because you are the parents, you are the voters, you have the ability, as a constituent of these schools, whether you're a parent or whether you're a voter, your voice counts more than mine. And so that's where this partnership grows. That's why we need folks engaged in this effort and to talk about these issues in a way that both continues to lift up ethnic studies and the important role it plays for all kids and our interests as a Jewish community. But finally, there's still one missing piece of the recipe that we have to think about, and that's coalition building. We can't only advocate for ourselves. And at JCRC Community Relations Council, the community relations part is about building coalitions with our neighbors and building relationships with Black, Latino, Asian, and Indigenous leaders and students and parents who want to see this through. One of the big problems that we had is there was a lack of understanding on those communities' parts as to why our community cared about this issue in the first place. So we need to be able to build the relationships with those community leaders and with elected officials from those communities so they understand our community's position on these issues. And that's one reason that we launched the Here I Am campaign. The rabbi talked about Hineni showing up all over this Torah portion, and how Abraham and Isaac are saying, I'm here for you. Well, this campaign is about being here for each other. It's a robust campaign against anti-Semitism, and we've started doing videos of allies online talking about their commitments to the Jewish community and our community's commitments to them in a time of rising hate against the Asian and African American communities in particular over the course of this pandemic, right? And in August, we had a beautiful ceremony at Emmanuel in San Francisco with Mayor Breed and 30 civic and elected officials who stood together to say, here I am, against anti-Semitism and hate. We need to band together with our neighbors. And I'm pleased to share that on Monday, we're going to do the same thing in this room, because it's raining, probably, right?
Yeah, most likely.
So we're thrilled that we have the mayor of Oakland, the mayor of Berkeley, the superintendent of Oakland Public Schools. We have 3 members of the California State Legislature that represent Alameda County coming, and probably around 40 council members, school board members, community leaders. We have the unofficial mayor of Oakland Chinatown coming. We need to make sure that we are all banding together to say, here I am. And we'll have a number of elected officials and civic leaders and education leaders in the room who will help understand how to move this forward, this conversation forward, and how we can move forward with this important work of ethnic studies together. So I am thrilled that Rabbi Bloom has agreed to host this incredible event. We hope that it can further the conversation that we've all been feeling around anti-Semitism, and it can open an important discussion for our leaders in public schools about our interests in ethnic studies, not only for our community, but for all of our kids. And so I'm grateful to all of you for your partnership around this, talking to you, Nick, and I'm just really thrilled that we're going to have this exciting event on Monday together. So I want to thank you all for listening. Thanks for your partnership with JCRC. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Now, Ty, will you be around for a few minutes at the lunch in case people want to ask some questions? All right, excellent. And just so if you want to ask individual questions, you can do that afterward. There won't be too many for the service right now, but I would like, and Ty will look just for fun. If you are a teacher or school board member, former school board member, work in one of the just stand up so you can see. So Ty, you can see who's here. Some of the teachers union representatives and the like. So these are people who are quite active in the schools movement. So they may be talking to you first, but all right. Thank you so much. We are going to.
I'm Gregory. I was on the open school board until last year, and many of you followed last year a big brouhaha in Oakland, which if you want to hear more about it, I'll tell you, but I just want to thank everybody in this community for showing up in that moment, because your advocacy, your voices really, really made a difference. That was one of the hardest issues that I confronted in 12 years on the school board, and I really appreciate the support last year.
Thank you, Jody, and we appreciate all you did in those 12 years for Oakland and for our community as well. All right, so we'll continue to pray now. We're going to rise, page 239, Hatzi Kaddish.
Yikada Shemeraba Elma Dimarachim Tevia Mitmachote Chayachon Mirachon Chayachon Beit Yisrael Vagalavis Mankari Vimru Amen Yehesh Miraba Mevarach Lelam Leomayam Yitbarach Vishabach Yitar Shemam Yitaseh Vitadar Vitadar Vitlach Shmir Kudeshah Barichu Leilam Kover Chatav Shirata Tush B'chatav V'nachamata Namiram Be'opa Vimru Amen Lufi Yagiti Lakecha Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor Ve'hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'konei Hakol V'zocher Chasdei Avot U'mevi Goel Lifnei B'neihem L'man Shemo Be'ahava Melech Ozer Moshiach U'magid Baruch Atah Adonai Magid Avraham U'fokei Tzara Atah Gibor Elam Adonai V'chayei Timatara V'hoshia Mashir HaRuach U'ma'id HaGashem Mechachel Chayim V'chesed Mechayei Reitim V'rachamim Rabim Zomech Noflim V'rofet Holim U'matir Asurim U'mechayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Nidamo Chaval Gevurot U'mido Melav Melech Meini T'mechayem U'matzmiach Yeshua V'ne'eman Natan HaChayot B'tim Baruch Atah Adonai Mechayei HaBeitim Na'aritzecha v'na'akdishecha Yesod Tziyach Sarfei Kodesh Amakdishim Shimcha B'Kodesh Kakahatu V'yanamiacha V'karazel Zeme'amar Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech Haaretz Kevodo, Kevodo Malei Olam, Mishartav Shoalim Ze Lazeh, Ayei Mikom Kevodo, Umatam Baruch Yomeru, Baruch Shecha katuv le'or. Yivrach Adonai le'olam Elohei Tzion. L'dor v'dor, Alleluia. L'dor v'dor nagid olecha, v'netzach netzachim kedushacha nakish. V'shivcha Eloheinu mipinu le'am v'shle'olam va'ed, ki amal gadol v'kadosh ata. Baruch atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh.
Continue on our own, pages 247 through 258.
Shalom Bivrama, Uyasa Shalom Aleinu, Ve'alko Yisrael, Ve'imru Amin. Yasa Shalom, Yasa Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'alko Yisrael, Yasa Shalom. Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'alko Yisrael. Page 259. Yikara v'yikara shemei Rabbav, ve'omadu ra'chatev v'chakutev v'chayachon v'yamachon v'chayed kol beit Yisrael, v'agalav izman kariv v'yimeru. Yehei shmei Rabbav v'borach, le'olamo ve'omaya yipara. Yitbarach v'shabach v'kar Shema Hinaseh v'tadar v'taleh v'tolal Shmei Kedusha le'en yamim kol berchatav shirata tishbach Atabanachamata, Damirami Omadi, Meru. Tika, Slatanabata, the Flazel, Kadamabahani, Mishmayavi, Meru. Yehish, Lamaram, Mishamaya, Famalina, Flazel, Meru. Ose Shalom, Rama, Kuyasa Shalom, Alina, Flazel, Meru.
Come on in. Oh, Ain Kalamego. Actually, let me start. Keep coming. I need to do one thing. Let's see. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Ain Kalamego. Ain Kalamego. Ain Kalamego. Ain Kamoshi-enu. Mi Kalamego. Mi Kalamego. Mi Kalamego. Mi Kamoshi-enu. Please rise for the Aleinu.
Aleinu Mishameh Adonai, Latei Kidulah Zereshi, Shelo Asanu G'day Haratzot, Elo Asamanu G'mishmelot Adama, Shelo Samchel Kidulah, V'Gor Aleinu G'lo Mamonam, Hanam G'kori, Umishachari Moni, Livnei Melech, Malchei Hamlavim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, She'emunah b'shamayim yosed haaretz, U'moshavim kavro b'shamayim miha'av, U'shchinatu zo, V'kotei meromi, Hu Eloheinu Enon, Emet Malkeinu Epesulato, Kakatu B'Torato, V'edat Hayom V'Hashemota, El Levadecha, Ki Adonai Hu Elohim, Asher Hamayim Ima'ah, Ve'al Haaretz,
relatives and friends as your sites we observe during the coming week, thinking especially today of Yehuda Breslov, William Davidson, Nathan Engelberg, Julius Goldberg, Arthur Gurovich, Bertha Jaime, Herschel Hertzman, Rabbi David Jessel, Ida Lazerwitz, Pablo Macias, Morris Mauskampf, David Migdal, Sarah Morovsky, Benjamin Mutnick, Rosa Quitman, Anna Ramick, Bertha Rosenblatt, Isidore Scheinberg, Meyer Schulak, Emma Schaefer, Marvin Spielman, Jeanette Goad Taylor, Richard Tim Bannock, George Wasserman, Dorothy Wood, And we're in the Shloshim for Cantor Richard Kaplan. The memories of all of them are with us. We ask all those who are in mourning or observing Yahrzeit, as well as anyone else who would choose to do so, to rise from the mourner's Kaddish at this time on page 267. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah Belma Divrachim Te V'Amlich Malchute V'Chayechon V'Yomechon V'Yidechol Beit Yisrael Bagala V'Zman Kariv V'Imru Amen Yehesh Me Rabban V'Orach Le'olam L'Omei Maya Yitbarach V'Yishtabach V'Yitba'ar V'Yitramam V'Yitnaseh V'Yitadar V'Yitaleh V'Yitalal Shemei Kudsha Arehu La'ela Mikol Berchata V'Shirata Tushbechata V'Nechemata Tamiran V'Yoma V'Imru Amen Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'Chaim Aleinu V'El Kol Yisrael V'Imru Amen Oseh Shalom V'Imroma Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu V'El Kol Yisrael V'Imru Amen. May the memories of the people you've come to say Kaddish for, may they be a blessing to you always, and let us say Amen. All right, so a few announcements. I want to thank our Torah readers and Haftorah reader, Oti Gould, Kurt Jacker, Lisa Snarkin. Is that good? Did I get all the Torah? Okay, good. Thank you to our board greeters, Ann Rapson and Michael Aronson. Thank you to our guest speaker, Ty Gregory. Very, very enlightening, even if a little bit frightening. And so it's important that we share those things, and we're really, really looking forward to Monday at our Hineni event. We are pretty much full, so unless you really, really want me to sneak in, let me know. But otherwise, we're full of spaces. And what you're going to see, apparently, most of the TBA members will be here, but politicians will be kind of standing up here, unless the weather is like this and we're going to have it all outside, which was the original plan. But it's unlikely, because whatever that atmospheric river means, apparently means a lot of rain. So we have that. Announcements coming up. Events, we have Adult Ed with Mitzia Shaket tomorrow, 10 a.m. Virtual Film Club tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. We have Morning Minyan at 8 a.m. here in the sanctuary at 8 on Monday and Thursday. We have weekly text study continues at Rocky's Brooklyn Basin, a nice outdoor covered area there. And next Saturday, we have the Bat Mitzvah of Miriam Bilfeld. And in November, we will begin a coat drive to benefit City Team, which is the organization we work for that deals with hunger, homelessness in Oakland. We sometimes serve food there as well. And also there is a blood drive here at 12 noon on Wednesday, November 3rd. So a lot of good things happening, and you'll have more information coming to you via email. Wonderful to have Hazanit Yael Krieger with us today, and she will close the service. Oh, well, sort of. She'll close the service for the Don Olam, but don't leave unless, like, you're not going to stay for lunch. Then I guess you can leave. We are going to do Kiddush and Mozi. I'm going to do it up there. So, in case you haven't been here any of the last 2 weeks, the procedure is we've already done the blessing, so you can proceed right to the social hall, grab your food inside the social hall with your mask left on, then come out and sit at the tables and eat your lunch. And hopefully you won't think us rude. Karen and I really still don't eat with other people, even outdoors, so we kind of we either hide or I sit in the middle of the grass by myself. I'm not lonely, I promise. And then I put my mask on and talk to people. We all have our different levels of comfort or discomfort with COVID. All right, I think that's it, but stick around for Kiddush. Adon Olam, page 269.
Adon Olam, Asher Malav, B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra.
please rise for Kiddush. And we're still on mic, by the way. We're going to let the few people who are watching at home join us for Kiddush. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'rotam b'ritolam v'ni b'nei Yisrael otim le'olam v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat Adonai Hashemayim ve'et ha'aretz v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'rotam b'ritolam u'yamash Shabbat ve'nafas Shabbat v'yinafas v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot את יום השבת בקדשהו, סברי, לחיים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, המוציא לחם מן הארץ. תהיה בו. שבת שלום.